Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me. My name is Touseef Ahmed. I'm a PhD scholar in Texas Tech University, and I work on fruit bats, Indian flying foxes. So the topic of my presentation is effect of extreme heat on Indian flying foxes in Pakistan. So as you all know, uh, that the climate change crisis is gearing up, and as it goes up, there are many associated things like the one which I study is extreme heat. So the extreme heat is elevated or increased amount of heat for extended period of time, and it impact humans and wildlife and everything. So and these extreme heat events are universal. They are occurring in the US, in South Asia, in many parts of the world. So here from my country, Pakistan, so we are experiencing extreme heat for couple of years, like maybe 2 decades. So the frequency and intensity of extreme heat is increased, and people, humans, died in not in, hundreds, maybe in thousands. So uh, but the poorly understood thing is how these extreme heat events are impacting flying foxes or animals. So the literature tell us that these flying foxes, the big fruit bats, are extremely vulnerable to extreme heat. And in Australian research, where these extreme heat has caused deaths of thousands of bats in a single day in 2014. One third of particular one bat species, flying fox, died. So the conservation of that species changed overnight. And I was really interested to know how these extreme heat events are impacting flying foxes in Pakistan or in Indian subcontinent, because this species, the Indian flying fox, has a geographic niche in Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and these others, South Asian countries. So, and here, and then if we know like how the extreme heat events are impacting, then we can place the mitigation measures before they start impacting these bats and eventually they died. So we need to quantify, first we need to know whether there is any impact of extreme heat on Indian flying foxes, because there is no such study being conducted in this region. So the assumption, the widely used assumption is based on Australian literature, is then when the temperature exceeds 42 degrees Celsius, then this temperature is lethal for flying foxes, and they died, and they died in number. And so that was my assumption. So, and here are how the animal cope with the flying fox cope with extreme heat. So, so there are some animal characteristics which help animal to cope with the heat challenge. So these flying foxes particularly, they salivate, they pant, they fan wing, they have other behavioral adaptation to cope the challenge. Then there are some other characteristics which come from the environment, like how the air temperature, humidity, wind speed, and solar radiations are impacting these flying foxes or bats. So a lot of goes in need to be understand before we come up with any thing that is tangible regarding the impact of extreme heat on flying foxes. So my study conducted, and we monitored flying foxes 8 different roosting sites across central and northern areas of Pakistan. And we aim to determine the temperature threshold for this flying fox species in the Indian subcontinent region, and particularly Pakistan. And we want to document their heat stress behaviors. And it's important to tell you that the flying foxes exhibit a series of extreme heat behavior, thermoregulatory behaviors, and they are like a sequential. For example, when the temperature is like about 35 degrees Celsius roundabout, then they start fanning their wings. And eventually, when the temperature rises up, they start clustering, which means that they start moving toward the middle story vegetation. These flying foxes lives on trees, so they start moving toward the tree trunk, and then clustering, and then the temperature mm, uh, further exceed, like at 42 degrees Celsius or like 41, 42 degrees Celsius, they start clumping. The clumping behavior is the one which is seen on this picture. So these flying foxes attach themselves with the tree trunk. It's a very unique, fascinating animal behavior. They start clumping toward the tree. So this is a clumping behavior, and then they start fainting like a dog faint, and then eventually they die. So we monitor all these behaviors, and how we do that. Uh, uh, we have we use camera trapping. So we have our research assistant, 8 of them at 8 different roosting sites. We have a we have a sensors in place that monitor the temperature. We have the students with the cameras, very high resolution cameras, so that they can take the videos. Meantime, there is the temperature recording. So we are like a live streaming behavior for 3 consecutive months. So that's what how we do to quantify the to quantify the temperature threshold at which these bats died. And then we also investigate the role of different landscape variables like forest cover or a nearby water resource, that how these landscape variables are impacting these thermoregulatory behaviors. And then we are also monitoring the cortisol hormone in the fecal sample. So the cortisol hormone is a stress hormone and very stable in the feces of wildlife, particularly flying foxes, and they will help us to quantify the amount of the stress experienced by bats. And other thing is we conducted cross-sectional survey local people to know any historic die-off, because there is no such study being conducted. So we want to know that. And another thing which I want to tell you that uh, in news in Pakistan, in India, in other in South Asian countries, we have the news reports on the bats being died, but there is no study. So that was the first study that developed that relation. So here is my sampling design. I started this project back in May, and then August till August, 3 months on 8 different roosting sites, and this is the study map. So because, and this is like a challenge for my project, because we have to record a high resolution videos, and it's over 4 terabyte data. And that is a huge data to deal with. So that was my challenge. Then we have collecting over 500 fecal sample, and fecal sampling is still in process. And we collected water sample, food samples, which is left over by the bats to determine our hypothesis. And our results are the preliminary results. We don't have any publication yet, but these are our preliminary results. So we found that extreme heat events has resulted in deaths of bats in Pakistan. And unlike Australian flying foxes, where 42 degrees Celsius is the documented temperature at which these bat dies, flying foxes dies. But for Pakistan and maybe for the South Asian region, this is not the case. These bats tend to have the ability to tolerate even higher temperature. And what we have found that it is not the acute rise in temperature which led to the death of these bats, which means that, for example, on a certain day, if the temperature is even 46 degrees Celsius, that bat will not die. The bats will die if there is a heat wave, like consecutive 3 days temperature for maybe 45 or 42 or 43. So the heat wave is the killer, rather acute rise or a sharp rise at one particular day in temperature and humidity. And then we found the role of landscape variables. We found that water bodies like the water canals or rivers, they have a very important role in conserving the biodiversity, particularly flying foxes in Pakistan and in those regions which have these water channels. In Pakistan, we have an Indus River. It's the largest river in Pakistan. It has a lot of water canals originating from it, irrigating a lot of Pakistan area. So we have like a water channel network. So and a lot of biodiversity survive on those channels. So that's how we found it. And then these are some pictures from our research. We reporting the dead bats due to extreme heat, and these are more pictures of extreme heat. And this is the data from our sensors. So I told you that we have a sensors installed. It's a very accurate sensors. They take temperature and humidity and dew point reading at every 15 minutes, and they store it automatically. And then at the end of the study, we retrieve all the data. So this is how the data look. And this is the data at which the flying foxes died. So it's at that particular day. So, and then these are the cross-sectional surveys that I have described earlier, that local people interacting and talking about, is there any historic die-off? We actually want to know how many, because this time, the summer of 2021 is not extreme heat in Pakistan, maybe in South Asia, as compared to 2020 or 2019 or back years. But still, we documented the dead bats. And then these are some thermoregulatory behaviors. We have a flying fox here, and it is dipping his belly in the water channel to get the evaporative cooling at an extreme heat day. And we have challenges like the high resolution cameras challenge. Our roosting sites are far off in the jungle, and we have the pandemic, and the biggest challenge, like our students need to travel daily, and we don't want any of our student or any research assistant to get infected from COVID. So that are the challenges. And so, we installed our sensors at top of our trees, and it is quite hard because we have a fear like our senses being displaced or being carried away by someone. So that was again challenge. And here is I retrieving the data from the sensors and sitting on a tree, and that's and we have a lot of wildlife while monitoring that, doing this research, like a jackal or a boar, maybe snakes, so many things. So, and this is my team, which helped me to do this research in summer of 2021. And here are my collaborators and my advisor, Professor Tigger Kingston from Texas Tech University. And here is the end of the presentation. I really thank you for giving me this opportunity to discuss this research funded by Rufford project. Thank you so much. If you have any question, please let me know.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ahmed. Are there questions members of the audience would like to ask? Anyone? Any questions?
I would like to ask a question from Rauti. One of the situations about Indian flying foxes in Sri Lanka is actually it's considered as a pest. Is that the same case in Pakistan as well? And so, because it's a pest and it is dying in major numbers during these heat years, how does the public react to that? Just a general question.
Yeah, so in Pakistan, Tropus medius or Indian flying fox is considered as a pest. Unfortunately, this blame being as a pest for flying fox is not true. They are not serious pests. In fact, they are effective pollinators for a number of fruit crops like mangoes and bananas, and there are so many others. And interesting thing about these flying foxes is they are the only pollinators at nighttime. So we have the birds, we have the insects, but they are active only in the day. These flying foxes, even these big bats or the smaller bats, they are pollinators for those flowers that blooms in the night. And I told you number of, and they carry the lot of big seeds like the mango seed, and disperse and help in the forest regeneration. So it's a public misperception that people consider them as a pest. There is need to conserve this species because this is vital for local economies and forest regeneration and so many other pest control services. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Any more questions? Looks like there aren't any. So shall we proceed to the next one? The next presentation is entitled Origins of Biodiversity in Sri Lanka, the research tale by Mr. Kanishka. Good.
Right, so I'm here to talk about some interesting stuff about the origins of biodiversity in this country. So most of you probably know picture. Certain things are missing. That's fine. Right. Most of you know pretty much interested in biodiversity, and a lot of people here are actually biodiversity conservationists and scientists. So they probably know by now that Sri Lanka is a biodiversity hotspot, along with the Western Ghats of southern India. So, as an evolutionary biologist, we are interested in understanding how this extreme high biodiversity originated in such places, including Sri Lanka. There are certain hypotheses to explain the origins of biodiversity. We were interested in looking at how how this happened in Sri Lanka. What caused or what reasons increased the biodiversity in Sri Lanka? Among the biodiversity in Sri Lanka, apart from plants, when it comes to vertebrates, reptiles and amphibians are the most diverse in this country. They contribute to the biodiversity very significantly in this country. So, I've been a herpetologist since my childhood. So I have always been interested in studying them. So I wanted to know, what could be the reasons behind the huge wealth of reptile diversity in this country. Right now we have like 242 species of reptiles in this country. So the number keeps increasing almost on a very, more than in a yearly basis. At least 3 or 4 species are described in a year when it comes to reptiles. So we have 242 species of reptiles, of which 151 are endemic, almost 64% endemic. So of these, 123 species are lizards. So even among lizards, it's quite a lot of endemic species. Almost nothing is known about the origins of these reptile biodiversity, how at least the lizard biodiversity is contributing either. So there should have been a picture here of the distribution of reptile diversity, but unfortunately it's missing. Right. So when it comes to previous studies of the origins of biodiversity in this country, several studies conducted by people like Frankie Buzoy, that should have been a picture here again, indicated that species colonized Sri Lanka from India, right? And once they came to Sri Lanka, they rapidly diversified or they speciated, increasing the number of species. So we actually don't know what caused this speciation, but that has been the trend, right? It was observed in amphibians, certain snake groups like the earth-dwelling shield-tailed snakes, and even crabs. Right? So that's quite interesting. Even crabs have undergone speciation in this country. Like out of the 51 species, 50 species are endemic, right? So that's quite interesting, very fascinating. For some reason, animals coming from India to Sri Lanka, once they come here, for some reason, speciating. So, and a study done in 2013 by Alex Byron and my friend they also concluded that snake diversity in this country was determined by multiple colonizations from India. Colonizations from India, and then certain lineages have actually within this island. Right? For example, Astimura. So there will be more interesting findings by Mr. Mendes Wickramasinghe and his wife, told. So let's keep an eye open for that. So a lot of studies indicated that a lot of species colonized Sri Lanka from India, but then an interesting group is the agamic group that we have. Again, there should have been a picture here. I have no idea what that. And so that indicates that the horned lizards, the Ceratophoras and the Rhizocephalus and Cophodes have close relatives in Southeast Asia. Right? So that's a bit of a perplexing question because we have never been geologically connected to the Southeast Asia region, but we have many Southeast Asian elements, including flora and fauna in this country. So that's still a gray area for a lot of scientists because we have no idea how they got here. Either they came through India and they became extinct in India, but for reasons unknown, we still don't know. So those are some of the previous studies that have shed some light on the origins of vertebrates in this country. And again, pseudophilaures, the shrub frogs, work done by Dr. Megas Kupura, again indicated that they colonized from Sri Lanka initially and diversified in Sri Lanka, and some of them even went back to India when the two land masses were connected back in the past. So my focus has been on lizards ever since 2015. So along with some of my colleagues, we have been engaged in such a study. Again, we have like 63 species of geckos, of which 53 are endemic, and skinks of Hicanolas, we have 33 species, of which 29 are endemic. So because of these reasons, we thought that these lizards would be an ideal group to study the origins of biodiversity in this country. When it comes to skinks, these genera, the Lankaskinkus and Nesia and Eutropis, they're quite diverse. We have 10 species of Lankaskinkus, 9 species of Nesia, and 9 species of Eutropis. What we have here are actually skinks, they are lizards, but they lack names. So they're quite interesting. I'll tell you some interesting stuff about them later on. So anyway, these are very interesting groups of skinks. And then we have the geckos. We have like among the geckos, a lot of you, some of you who are here might know that we have been highly engaged on the work of a particular group of geckos, which we call day geckos of genus Nemaspis. And so they're the most diverse lineage of geckos in this country. We have 40 species, and all of them are endemic to this country. So because of these reasons, we have been highly focused on studying these groups, Lankaskinkus, Nesia, Eutropis, and of course, Nemaspis. So the objectives of this ongoing study were to understand what are the biogeographic origins of Sri Lankan lizards, what are the patterns of diversification or speciation shown by Sri Lankan lizards, especially focusing on the taxa that I've been talking about. And then what processes have generated this exceptional diversity in this country? And then are there any evidence for cryptic diversity? What I mean by that is diversity, biodiversity that cannot be detected directly by our own eyes. So those can be revealed by genetic analysis. Right. So this study has been, I've been very fortunate to have some excellent collaborators, starting from legendary people like Ansel, and then of course well-known Mendes, Samira, and a lot of people. I thought some of them were going to be here, but they're not here. And then of course some collaborators from India as well. Yeah, and also some students. Right. So for the last 7 years. Right. So for the last 7 years, this is what we've been doing, traveling the country, having a good time. But since the corona happened, it has been stopped a little bit. But then we have been to almost 70 different locations in this magnificent island, and looking for lizards, geckos, skinks, right? And then we have collected tissue samples of almost 250 individuals. This study took us to offshore islands, sandy beaches, rhizome forests, rainforests, the mountain forests up in the hills, and then very interestingly, isolated forests in the dry zone. Right, so they are very unique. Some of them have dry zone conditions, wet zone conditions in the middle of the dry zone. So very exciting places. So what we have been doing is that collecting these stuff and then photographing them, taking tissue samples for DNA analysis, taking morphological observations, and then in the lab we have been, of course, engaged in DNA analysis by extracting DNA and PCR amplifying them, sequencing, and then doing the analysis. So let's share some of the findings that we have been successful in finding. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the genus Lanka stinkers. So genus Lanka stinkers, some pictures, Lanka stinkers. Right. So here, these two are Lanka stinkers. They are very small lizards, but if you look very carefully, they are very colorful lizards. And they just are very cryptic. What I mean by that is they run around the leaf litter. Almost every garden in this country might have at least one species, but very little is known about them. So to understand the biogeographic origins, we sought to a phylogenetic analysis. This study, this analysis revealed that the Sri Lankan Lanka skinkers are very closely related to skinks of the genus Ristella in southern India. Right? And it also indicated that these two populations, these two genera, Ristella and Lanka skinkers, separated almost 30 million years ago. And so this indicates that common ancestors of these two genera colonized Sri Lanka from India, and once they came to Sri Lanka, they diversified within this country, became the Lanka skinkers. So this all indicated that Sri Lanka was connected with India 33 million years ago, at least. So I sent one of my students at Gujarat University to look at the sun skinks. So these are, I'm sure you've seen this really large skink or the really large Shikanola that runs around in your garden, the bronze colored one. So it's a species of Eutropis. We have 9 species of Eutropis. So we were interested in also looking at their biogeographical origins. So this was done by one of my students. fill in Iraq. So her findings concluded that eutrophies colonized again Sri Lanka from India multiple times, at least 7 times. But then some of those colonizations again led to in situ diversification. So it was not so extravagant like Lanka stinkers or any other species, but then some diversification within this country. But then most of the colonization took place in the Miocene era. But then there were colonizations again in the Pleistocene era, which dates back from 2.6 million years to 10,000 years ago. So the reason most colonizers were less genetically divergent with their congeners in India. Right. So this again, we've also interested in understanding the 2 endemic genera, Nesia and Calcidosepes. So these are limbless things. Some of them have very small limbs. So we're also interested in looking at their biogeographic origins. So again, we saw to phylogenetic analysis. So this study was led by my friend in India, Dr. Roy. Dr. Roy. So we generated our stuff, our DNA sequences here, and then we shared them. So the interesting finding was that Calcidosepes and Nesia were related to a group of lizards, a group of skinks in Seychelles Island. Right? So when we went back in time to further study this, geologically, we found that 66 million years ago, Seychelles, India, and Sri Lanka were part of the same landmass. But then, for some reason, genetic analysis says that tells us that Lanka's clinkers and Calcidosepes Lanka's clinkers and their relatives in Seychelles split apart approximately 50 million years ago. So that somehow post-dates the initial breakup. And so probably you've heard of the Gondwana breakup, but this Gondwana breakup happened actually 66 million years ago. But then, however, some these popular species or the genera diverged somewhat a little later. So we still don't know how to explain that. Probably there were still connections even after the Gondwana breakup. Right. So then again, we have engaged in the study on the MSPs or the Dagicos, and we have described quite a lot of species. So this study is led by my good friend Suranjan Samira Kamaratna. So based on that, it indicates that Nemaspace genera, Nemaspace species again colonized Sri Lanka from India at least twice. But then the interesting scenario is that there's a group, we have 2 lineages of Nemaspace, Nemaspace Podihuna lineage and Nemaspace Candiana lineage. So Nemaspace Candiana lineage is closely related to species in Southeast Asia, which occur in Thailand and Java. So we have no idea how that is possible. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we have never had connections to Southeast Asia. Right. So then, interestingly, there's this gecko of genus Hemiphyllodactylus. Genetic analysis of Hemiphyllodactylus indicate that they are not genetically divergent from their populations in Southeast Asia. So this indicates that they have recently colonized this country. So if you look at their close relatives, they are highly similar to what we see in islands of Fiji, Papua New Guinea, and Malaysia, indicating that they probably were introduced to this country by humans. All right, so right. Okay. I thought I was only 15 minutes. Right. So when it comes to look at the patterns and process of diversification of species, Lanka's Kinder's lineage here that it initially created 5 main lineages, right? within just within the last 20 to 30, 25 to 15 million years ago. Yeah, 26 to 10 million years ago. And interestingly, so these species colonized the midlands of this country from the lowlands, and in the midlands they speciated. They increased their numbers in species, and then some of them moved to highlands, and some of them again moved back to lowlands. This particular group of lizards, which we call Lancusticus taylori, has undergone cryptic diversification. What I mean by that is that they're morphologically or externally extremely similar, but if you look at their DNA, they are quite divergent. And if you look at the pattern, it indicates that they have different genetically distinct populations in different mountain ranges. So that's quite interesting. Which means that they were a continuous population some time ago, and now they are separate or isolated populations. The same pattern was seen in another species of lizard, which is called Lancusticus taprobaiensis. Same pattern where you see different genetically distinct populations in mountains, isolated mountains. Right. So again, when it comes to Nemaspis, Nemaspis is somewhat slightly different because in almost their density is quite high. Again, in the dry zone mountains, because almost every mountain in the dry zone, small mountain in the dry zone, will have a species of Nemaspis there, and it's endemic to that mountain, which is unique because that small mountain is home to just a single species of gecko, and you won't see that species anywhere else. Or maybe it could be seen in a mountain very close by, but nowhere else. So such species are considered to be critically endangered because they are found only there. Right. So I think I've talked about this already. Right. So in conclusion, our findings suggest that the diversity of skinks and geckos in this country were driven by multiple colonizations from India and in situ diversification. It seems that isolation on mountains and bicavans, that is population divergence in short, seems to be a major driver of speciation for Lancusticus and Nemaspis. And then, so this was most likely that past climatological conditions allowed these species to spread apart in this island, and then the climate changed somehow, but retaining the ideal climates in these isolated mountains, so that these populations could persist on these isolated mountains. And so this most likely happened in the Pleistocene last glacial maximum. So some of these species, of course, indicate their morphologically cryptic diversity. They could, of course, be genetically, they could, of course, be distinct species, or they could even be considered as genetically distinct populations or evolutionarily significant units. Right. So I would like to thank these people, these organizations, including the Wildlife Department, the Forest Department, for allowing our study to conduct a study, and my host institution, Nazareth University, for all the facilities, and then most importantly, the funders, the Mohammed bin Zayed Fund, the IAY, and IFS. It's not the local one, it's the International Foundation of Science. Right, so yeah, I'm done. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Kanish.